It's the Critics Circle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight, guest critics Isa Goldberg, David Lefkowitz, and Miriam Gross join us for reviews of Lackawanna Blues, the Lehman Trilogy, and 6. Plus, from our vault, an interview with Shari Lewis Lamb Chop. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Critics Circle.
Hello again, Leslie. How are you?
Hello, Charlie. Okay. It's so good to be here with you.
Yes.
Or
yes, we've got
to be here with you. That's the way.
Yes, and we've got a full show. You picked a good night to come because we've got a really good full show for you today.
I did. We also have an old friend and colleague of mine as a guest tonight, and I'm very pleased to see Isa Goldberg. And today, our guest critic, sitting in for me, is Isa Goldberg. And Isa is a very dear friend in the sense that we've been on the drama desk together for, is it 20 years now, Isa? It's been forever. Okay. And not only is Isa a board member and the former president of the drama desk, she's also a member of the Outer Critics Circle. And she is a writer and reviewer for theaterlife.com. But she's also a working actress who just got back from Atlanta, where she starred in her 9th or 10th film, we're not quite sure, called The Lady Makers, which shot in Atlanta. I'm excited to pieces over this. Tell us a little bit about the film, or whatever you can tell us.
Sure, yeah. So the movie is about 3 wealthy Jewish sisters who decide to help inner city young women. So that's basically the narrative.
Okay, so that was one of the ideas, The Lady Makers, the title. But the title does give a lot of different possibilities and just in and of itself. And you did tell me that it jumps possibly generations, so that sounds really interesting. Today we're going to review, or you're going to review, Lackawanna Blues, starring, written by and directed by Ruben Santiago Hudson, a very favorite play of mine. And I'm going to cut out now, let the two of you talk about it. I'm going to come back for a little jump at the end.
Well, I think most of us are familiar with Ruben Santiago Hudson from his association with August Wilson as an actor, a director, an adapter in plays like Jitney, Ma Rainey, 7 Guitars. But this is his chance to act, write, and direct for himself. This is Lackawanna Blues, basically an autobiographical show of his life growing up and a tribute to the woman who raised him, Rachel Crosby, who it was better known as Nanny. And she not only raised him, she raised a whole community. This was an amazing, kind, generous woman. She had been working as a maid in Lackawanna, New York. She decided she did not like her situation, so she struck out. She opened a boarding house. She opened a second boarding house. She had a jitney service. And she served the community, and throughout it, she reached out to people. She brought Black people into the North where they could find jobs, where they could have lives. It's a beautiful tribute, and he not only impersonates her and his younger self, but all the people, all the eccentrics who stayed in her community house. And it's just him and a guitar accompaniment, that's Junior Mack. And it's a beautiful intermissionist 90-minute show.
Well, Charles, I think you hit the nail on the head when you described what he's doing on stage. He's playing all these other characters. It's an interesting solo show because the central character is not the actor or the subject of the autobiography himself. The subject is all of those people in his life who helped him become who he is. And that story of a very loving matriarch is dear to me at the moment because it's the subject of The Lady Makers. So I was particularly inspired to see Lackawanna Blues for the first time and found it very inspiring and uplifting and lots of fun. And I also appreciate that as an actor and a director, Ruben Santiago Hudson has worked with August Wilson throughout his life. And the play that he writes, Lackawanna Blues, demonstrates a lot of what Wilson looked for as a playwright. The simple humanity of these folks, brought together in a boarding house, or could be at a cab stand, or, wherever. But it's the characters who are perhaps weird to us become very colorful, which is also, I think, a part of Wilson's craft.
We get a good sense of who these people were. We get a good sense of who this community was. Occasionally, he'll pick up a harmonica, which he blows very nicely. I'm actually sorry we didn't have a little more of that. Mostly, it's just this Valentine to the people he grew up with. Maybe we should call them the gentleman makers.
Yeah, he has also, in addition to having a great command of language and employing the sensuality of language very much to his own benefit here, he also has the gift of creating physical life for these characters. He describes a woman who's kind of overweight with large hips by bobbing his head. And the picture is so completely intuitive and strikes a chord instantly.
It's a short show. It's 90 minutes, no intermission, which I think is just about the right length.
Oh, it's lovely. Very sweet 90 minutes. Yeah.
Does this reflect your experience, Leslie, what you saw? How long ago was it? What did he
Yes,
do this?
It was exactly the same show. It was directed by Loretta Greco, again, 20 years ago down at the Public. And I remember walking away elevated. And again, I was a lot closer to my own acting career at that point than I am now, many years past that. But I thought, what a stupendous acting job this was. And of course, Charlie, you've done 2 solo shows, so I'm sure, connect to that. I don't know if you've ever done any solo work, but there's something very special about being the only person on the stage, whether you imitate anyone or present anyone or not. I wanted to show you this. This is Lackawanna Blues, the movie. The movie had everybody who was anybody, directed by George C. Wolfe, who was an original producer on the play itself. Again, 90 minutes, but completely peopled by all the people he talks about. Jimmy Smits, Lou Gossett, Jeffrey Wright and his wife Carmen Ejago. It was done with a full orchestra led by Mos Def, who was kind of channeling his inner Cab Calloway. This is a play that stood up to a single person performing. It stood up to a complete cast. Esapatha Murkison won the Golden Globe, the Emmy, and the SAG Award for playing Nanny. And if you haven't seen it, you can see it free. It's on YouTube. Watch it. I just wanted to say that it's in my all-time top 20 plays that I've ever seen. Now, Charlie, explain the programs and the playbill.
Well, 1 to 5 playbills. 5 means you really liked the show, and 1 means you really didn't. So, Isa?
I love the show. I'd give it a 4.5. I'm very stingy with 5s, but I really did love the show.
I also enjoyed the show. I'm going to give it 4, and definitely recommended. Isa, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope we'll have you back.
Nice to see you. Good to see you, Leslie. Take care.
Well, our next guest is someone I am very excited to have back on the show. David Lefkowitz has made more appearances on Two on the Aisle than anyone, with the exception of myself, you, and Jeff Goodman. So
I'm just sorry that I'm missing the show. For example, this is the Lehman Trilogy that I wanted to see so badly, and it's going to be over before I'm able to get back to the theater. So I'm glad you have Dave Lefkowitz to talk to.
So without further ado, David Lefkowitz and I review the Lehman Trilogy. Our special guest critic this week for our On the Aisle review is my good friend David Lefkowitz. David is a critic, the author of the plays The Miracle of Long John's, and co-writer of Shalom Dammit with Rabbi Saul Solomon. And you can hear his weekly podcast, Dave's Gone By, where a frequent guest is our own Leslie Hoban Blake, going head-to-head with David Sheward in a weekly trivia contest. Dave, welcome.
Well, Charlie, it is delightful in so many ways to be back on Two on the Aisle, where for more than 2 decades I was often a guest on the show with you and Jeff and Leslie, and it's also great to be back in the theater. The show we're going to talk about is the first production that I have seen since March of 2020. So it was a big deal for me to step back into a Broadway theater.
You could not have made a better choice to return. This is the Lehman Trilogy. And I had heard wonderful things about this show, but I think the history of the Lehman Brothers, trading big Wall Street company that after 150 or so years went bankrupt in 2008, it's going to be this very long, dry, preachy, anti-banking, anti-capitalist evening. Ugh. And then I stepped into the theater. I could not have been more mistaken. This is a 3+ hour show, but it sure feels a lot faster. It's moving, it's theatrical, it's clever. It looks simple, but it is so beautifully done. This is the story of Lehman Brothers, but the story of the 3 Lehman Brothers. Jewish German immigrants who settled in the first part of the 19th century in Alabama. They were storekeepers. Then they became cotton brokers and traders and then bankers, and they reinvented themselves. In fact, one of the show's cleverest devices is how they keep putting a new sign on their store and later up on their office. And they built what became, I think, the 4th largest bank and trading company in the United States. And the show focuses on the brothers. There are these 3 ultra-talented actors.
Simon Russell Beale,
Adam Goodley, and Adrian Lester. They play the brothers. And they play every other part in the play, with the exception, I think, of a janitor. And you see how they spun on a dime. They were always looking out for new trends, for new opportunities, and seizing them. And we go up all the way into the firm's bankruptcy in 2008, which is where I think the play runs into a few relative, and I stress relative, problems.
Yeah, we both agree on that part of it, Charlie. We first agree that it is a riveting, compelling evening at the theater. And I was worried when I first started watching it about, 5-10 minutes in. I'm like, oh, it's readers' theater. Because for I would say 80% of the script, it's the actors essentially telling what is happening rather than having actual dialogues with each other. It's really very narrated all throughout. So I'm like, oh, okay, there's going to be a lack of drama here. No, mostly thanks to director Sam Mendes. And there is some poetry to the script, a lot of repetition, a lot of putting things in your mind that you're going to remember later. A line here will have relevance, an hour later, and you'll remember that, aha, that's why they set that up. But we also agree that the one stumbling block of the play is the 3rd act, because I feel that it could have been a great play had they really just stuck to the family and the family dynamics rather than telling the whole story of the firm. Because towards the last 20, 30 years of the firm's existence, it wasn't about the Lehman Brothers. It wasn't even Lehman family. Then, like the last 20, 30 years, this sort of happened and very quickly, and then suddenly, firm dies. Like, wait a minute, you just took us through 3.5 hours to sort of let us down and that was it? Whereas everything that was happening in the first 2 acts, I'm like, gripped.
As Devlin created this amazing set, which is a modern Wall Street office with projections all around it. And projections can be a problem, but in this case, I think it's the best use of them since the curious incident of the dog at night. It really enhances what we have. And I think, they use boxes.
Boxes is filing cabinet kind of boxes, but then it becomes a staircase. It becomes border, or things against the fire. Is just marvelously staged. I do wish it had been a bit more about the family dynamics and the morality of what they were doing, because we root for them. They're the protagonists, this family, this Henry Lehman who comes over. But at the same time, really mostly in the back of our minds is like, well, they're trading in cotton and they're trading in plantations and plantation owners. Do we realize that these are Orthodox Jews from the old country coming from a back history of slavery and a modern history of oppression, and then essentially contributing to the economy of the South and being really disturbed when the South falls down during the Civil War and not having a moral reckoning of any kind about that.
You mentioned they're a Jewish family, and you see how that plays a role in the lives of the three brothers, but less so their descendants. You see, when people die, how they observe the death. When one brother dies, they close the firm for 7 days to sit Shiva. But later on, not so much.
3 minutes. When one of the last Lehmans dies, they don't even close. There's businesses continue. Oh, Lehman died. Oh, well, yeah, which is so different.
One beautiful touch that I love was Candida Caldrecott, who was a pianist. She accompanies the dialogue during the show. There's an actual piano. She's actually playing it. This is a play that you have to sit in the theater to really experience. This is not something you could stream.
And think about what we're saying about this play, that it feels like an epic. It's an epic story. And what is it? It's 3 actors and a piano player.
Yeah.
And of course, the amazing set design, but it's sort of like 3, and that creates an epic.
And you're thinking, oh, yeah, that's why I'm going back to the theater.
Right. That's how I felt.
Which is why, out of 3, with a maximum of 5 stars or playbills, I am giving this, despite the petering out at the end, I'm going to give it a full 5.
Wow. I can't go that high, but a solid 4.25, maybe even 4.5. Yeah. Lehman Trilogy.
And now one of my favorite theater companions and a very clever critic, if I may say so, Miriam Gross, who just happens to be related to Charles Gross. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. And we will be talking about 6.
I missed that one too. Yeeks.
Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived.
Our special guest critic today is my daughter, Miriam Gross. She has co-written 4 plays and was the director of my solo show, How I Found an Affordable Apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, when I did it at the United Solo Festival off-Broadway. Miriam, welcome.
Thank you. It is good to be here.
And today we are going to be reviewing 6, the musical. As Mel Brooks often put it, it's good to be the king.
The queen? Nah, not so much.
Especially if you are the queen of King Henry VIII. In fact, he had 6 queens.
Yes, you might be familiar with the old adage from school, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived.
And this is the story of the queens. It is 1 part Broadway musical, 1 part Spice Girls concert, 1 part reality show, and yes, 1 part history lesson.
If you're looking for a very traditional theatrical experience, you will not get that with 6.
Right.
But if you're looking for good, real fun, you will absolutely find that. It's very much a concert experience, but it's a good one.
The wives are in concert, each presents their stories, and we, the audience, are supposed to choose which of the wives had it the hardest at the end of the show. Yes, folks, it's the Real Housewives of Buckingham Palace. Now, being that this is a concert, you see the women dressed in costumes that probably would not have been appropriate during the time of King Henry VIII, and there is a band on stage, and there are laser effects, and all in all, it actually works very nicely, I think. Give the show's authors, Tony Marlowe and Lucy Morse, credit for the sheer nerve, and for more or less pulling this off. The absurdity of the concept, and I mean that in a good way, is also reflected in the direction of Miss Morse and her co-director, Jamie Armitage, and in the choreography of Carrie Ann Ingalls. The cast of the Queens is solid. They know how to play off of each other, whether they're being nice or snarky. The standout for me was Andrea McCassett as Anne Boleyn. I found the music, and especially the lyrics, a bit on the weak side, with the exception of the opening number, which seems to have been a reflection of the Merry Murderesses number from Chicago. Of course, it would have helped if I could have actually heard the lyrics more clearly.
Yes, there were definitely some errors in the sound production. There were times when the microphones cut out. It didn't ruin the show by any means, but it was noticeable, and it did happen a few times. It's also worth noting that if you like a more Gen Z style of humor, very like sort of referential wink wink, you might find more enjoyment in the lyrics than you would otherwise.
Do we really get to know these women? Well, not really. It's an 80-minute show. You have 6 stories, and there's no intermission. But it will most likely whet your appetite to either Google them or at least look up the Queen's bios in the playbill?
While it's a relatively shallow dive into each of these women, they do each get their own distinct voice and sound, and each queen and her song is based on a couple of pop singers of the last 2 decades, for everyone from Britney Spears to Beyonce.
Although they mention Anne Boleyn had a daughter with King Henry VIII, they neglect to mention that it was Queen Elizabeth I. This is kind of strange considering that this musical is all about girl power, and Queen Elizabeth I was one of the most powerful girls ever.
So, in conclusion, how would you rate Six the Musical?
Well, as I said before, it's a concept that ranks on the absurd, but it works. So I would give this 3 out of 5 stars.
I would give it 3.5 out of 5 playbills.
Charlie has gone back to his vault. Charlie's vault goes back to the days of 3-inch tape, I believe. He used to have to do this on a regular camcorder. But he has interviews that he got forever. And in 1994, one of the interviews he got when he was a child,
Not
in
quite.
1994, he got an interview with Shari Lewis herself and Lamb Chop.
And I'm here with Shari Lewis, who is one of the stars of Lamb Chop on Broadway.
You've got it, only one of them. Actually, this is a one-woman show with a cast of thousands.
What can we expect to see?
It's a musical comedy, original book by Saul Turteltaub. Saul is one of the great comedy writers of Hollywood, and an original score, beautiful songs. Ooh, are they good? And a lot of audience participation. I dare say this is one of, not the, but one of the first Broadway shows that, book musical, that actually has audience participation. This year I'm celebrating my 40th anniversary as a children's television entertainer. And it's really nice. This is a very nice year. Jimmy Niederlander Jr. bringing us to Broadway, to the Richard Rodgers, and the 40th anniversary. And Lamb Chop says she's 6 years old, and she's been 6 for 36 years. So
That's an even better record than Jack Benny.
yes.
So when you started, there was no Lamb Chop. She came along later on?
No, I was working with big dummies, big wooden dummies, and Captain Kangaroo took one look and said, "Don't you have anything that's little and delicate? You're 5 feet tall, the dummy's as big as you are." And I had Lamb Chop because my father had said, if Mary has a little lamb, why shouldn't Shari have a little lamb? And I was a teenager, so I was at High School Music and Art here in New York. So I said what every teenager says, "Oh, Daddy," and walked away from it. And then the next person, somebody in the art department, who said, "I want to make you a puppet, what shall I make?" And I said, "How about a lamb?" because it was the last thing in my ear. And she talked to me immediately.
And I guess the rest is history, but you've had some other characters also, Hush Puppy.
Well, Hush Puppy and Charlie Horse are in Lamb Chop on Broadway. They're very much a part of it. And the fun is that we have 3 dancers playing the big Hush Puppy and the big Lamb Chop and the big Charlie Horse as well, so that I get to dance with them, which really feels nice. It feels like I have a grown daughter. I work with her. It's a great joy working with your daughter. Well, I feel like I'm working with my daughter and my sons when I work with Lamb Chop and Charlie Horse and dance with them. It's a totally different experience.
Is there anything you've noticed that's different now in children's television? It's obviously a little more high-tech, perhaps, but have the basics really changed?
Yes, they've changed tremendously. When I started, every station put on children's programs, and they were gentle. Gentle was the name of the game. And now they're quite violent.
Do you do anything different now than you did years ago?
Yes. I used to have to slow down. I talk very fast. And everybody used to say, "Shari, slow down so the children can follow you." The kids have caught up to me. I don't have to slow down for them anymore. Kids are really with it. And I can talk fast and I can work fast. And you don't even have to complete your sentences, complete your thoughts. The kids are with you. They're quite wonderful that way.
Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And I'm here with the other star of Lamb Chop on Broadway, the title star, Lamb Chop.
Ta-da! Hello, who are you?
I'm Charlie Gross. I do a show on the theater, and
How come you do this show?
well, honestly, because I really like theater a lot, and I started in when I was in college, and just the opportunity came along, and we decided to do the show, and I found another guy who does it with me.
What does the other guy do? You don't have another guy with you today.
No, well, he's in the studio watching this right now, and we cover shows and we review them. Kind of like Siskel and Ebert, only we cover Broadway, which you are appearing on.
Is that exciting or is that exciting? Ah! I'm excited.
Me too. The question that I have is, I notice, you appear with Shari Lewis, and you get the top billing, the big lettering. Who's your agent?
Shari Lewis. She doesn't ever get jealous of me.
That's good. You guys, how long have you guys been working together?
About 36 years.
And how old are you?
I'm 6 years old, and I'm going to be 6 years old for the rest of my life. I like this.
How did you manage that?
I really work at it.
I noticed you have a television show.
I have a television show, and it's on PBS. I know how to spell PBS. PBS.
And you have kids participating in this
They
show.
precipitate with me all the time.
That's nice. How long have you been doing that show?
Since, I don't know, 3 seasons, and we just been renewed. I've been renewed.
Hopefully for a long time. It's a great I've actually watched the show. It's a wonderful show.
Thank you very much.
I just want to ask you to do one thing for
What
someone.
is that?
I would like you to just look at the camera.
I don't know where the camera
Okay,
is.
it's that thing with the pretty girl standing
Okay, go
behind
ahead.
it. And just say, Margie, I love you, a bushel and a peck.
Who's Margie?
Margie is my wife. She's expecting our first child. She's a big fan of yours.
Oh, congratulations, and you're adding to my audience.
Absolutely.
And I'm always grateful.
We already have the lamb chop puppets ready for the baby, if Margie doesn't keep them for herself.
Thank you. Margie, I love you. A bushel and a peck, a bushel and a peck, and a hug.
Me too, Margie. Lamb Chop is still going strong after Shari Lewis's death. Her daughter Mallory took over the family business. Lamb Chop is still out there, and she's still 6 years old. And that is our show for this evening. And Leslie and I will see you
in the Critics Circle.
One song on your show, The Song That Does Not End.
Yes.
I get together with my friends and we do sing-alongs. That's a very popular number. We're not quite sure how to stop once we start
Well,
with that
it's
one.
not the song that never ends, it's the song that doesn't end.
Doesn't.
And I have a version that's called The End to the song that doesn't end.
Does it involve slamming doors? Or is
Nope,
this-
nope, nope.
Is it in the play? Or can how would we hear that one?
I'll do it for you now. They sing, this is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever, but because, this is the end part, this is a very special day. I've got a gift to send your way, and it's the kind of moment you will never see again, because this is going to be the long-awaited moment when the band will play one final blast, and we will live in peace at last, and you will hear the song that doesn't end. Yum, dum, 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 end. That's it.